Hello and welcome to Winter Watercolor Stationery. My name is Elise and I will be leading your workshop that's coming up in the next couple of days. I'm so excited for us to have our time together, but before then I wanted to give you this video as a means to get prepped. The few things that I'll go over are the supplies that you'll need and some preparation that you can do before our course. The supplies that you'll need for the workshop are your pad of watercolor paper, most likely cold press, and your dimensions will be somewhere to 11 inches to anything larger. We'll cut it down so you don't have to worry about it quite yet. You'll also want your set of watercolor paints, being sure that you have all primary colors, secondary colors, black and white. Mine are from tubes and I squeeze them into palettes so that they dry out. But right now, as you're learning to work with watercolors, I think starting out with a palette of already dried watercolor paints will work best for this workshop. You'll want a surface to blend on, which is a palette, either plastic or metal. And I will show you how to prepare that later on. Paper towel to dry your brush and clean off your brush. A toothbrush to prepare your palette, which I'll show you how to do later on. A pencil and large eraser. I like to use the eraser that's not on the end of a pencil because that allows me to more cleanly erase things. A set of black ink pens that are a variation of fine points. I use the Pigma Micron set. They're black and have a variety of fine point pens that work really well for ink drawing. A set of watercolor paintbrushes with a variety of sizes and shapes. And if you have them on hand, salt, Q-tips, and air blowers, which you can use either straws, or I actually have like a respirator that you can get for like $2 at a pharmacy or a grocery store that is for getting the mucus out of babies' noses, but it works really well as a way of not having to get lightheaded and blowing air out of a straw all the time. And above all else, you'll want a workspace that you feel like you can get in your creative mood and have a lot of ample room to be able to have your supplies surrounding you. To get yourself prepared for the workshop, you're going to open up your pad of watercolor paper and we're going to measure it to be 14 by 10. That way we can fold our paper in half to make 5 by 7 stationery cards. How I've learned to measure my paper as an artist is to make sure that you're making the correct dimensions is you make marks in multiple places. So I measure 14 at the base of the paper, I go up a little bit further, I mark that same 14, I go up further, and I mark 14 one last time. This way I make multiple points of reference so that when I draw a line across, I can line up with these various points and make sure that I have a straight line. And then this will be the line that I cut. And I always like to be really resourceful with all my paper, so the bits of paper that I have left over from the cutting of the edges, sometimes I'll make watercolor bookmarks out of them. Once you cut down your paper, you'll fold it in half so that the edges line up here. From this edge, you can decide whether you want to just tear this edge here or cut this edge again. I like to tear my edge, which gives it a bit more of a natural feel. I really like my stationery to be imperfect because I think that often that helps show the handmade side of things and gives the paintings a bit more character.
often watercolor paper is very fibrous as well, and I think that these edges can be really pretty on how they show texture. Now that you've cut your paper, you'll fold it in half again. And voila! From your 10 by 14 piece of paper, you'll get 2 stationery cards. The next thing that I want us to prepare is our palette. So often one thing that we want to avoid as watercolor artists is the water kind of seems to shrink back into itself, and that's something that when mixing colors we want to avoid on a palette because it's really hard to be able to pick it back up from the palette and continue to use it after we've mixed it. So I'll show you a trick that you can do to avoid that. What you'll do is you'll take the toothbrush that I showed you earlier on in the video, and you'll take a little bit of toothpaste that has baking soda in it. And I know this seems sort of bizarre. And really try and scratch it up a little bit, that surface of your palette, and coat it with a thin layer of toothpaste. So it's minty fresh and clean. Then you'll take your paper towel, you'll wipe off the palette of toothpaste, and now when you try and mix it, it should have a little bit of a different effect. So if I were to come here, you can see that that water spreads so much more fluidly and does not restrict into itself. Now you should be all set to go and ready for the workshop. See you soon.